This is my review of the Ace Pro, part 3 of 3. Updating firmware. Firmware updates are the easiest and quickest I've ever seen across all my devices. Once you connect the phone app to the camera, it walks you through the process. It doesn't take long at all, and once the camera restarts, it's ready to be used again. Apps. The Mac app isn't the easiest to use. I found it buggy and the user interface takes some getting used to. Though you are able to take video files straight off the memory card and edit them in Final Cut Pro, the reality is that much of the advertised functionality requires the apps in order to get the most out of the camera. Specifically, the app can be used for flow state stabilization, changing the field of view, image processing, audio processing, adjusting the aspect ratio, applying speed ramps, applying a fake ND filter for motion, I didn't like this, and applying overlays. In order to work properly, the app seems to rely on additional files to reference some metadata, so be careful not to accidentally delete those. There are signs of better integration with Final Cut Pro, but they don't look very far along, so there isn't much to review here. And this is a shame because the whole app really ought to be a plugin for your editor of choice. The iOS app seems to work well, better than the Mac app, but it's obsessed with showing me ads. Why? I already bought your product, leave me alone now. Insta360 shows off about reliable background file transfers, which is definitely long overdue in the world of mobile companion apps of this sort. The editor seems decent for sharing something short on social media, but I don't really want to fill my phone's memory with bulky files like this, nor do I want to edit on a tiny screen, so this is not for me. The best feature of the app, in my opinion, is the remote control functionality, which does provide a live preview and works surprisingly well. When the Ace Pro was launched, they made a big fuss about a new generative AI feature. It seems to swap out frames in your footage with what I can only describe as drop-in replacements from parallel dimensions. This is legitimately innovative, but I think the novelty will wear off just about as fast as it does for any other filter. However, I hesitate to rely on yet more online functionality, which will inevitably be shut down long before I decide my camera has reached the end of its life. Besides, if it's happening in the cloud, then it's really a separate service that can be applied to any footage, not just from the Ace Pro. And if it's not unique to the camera, then it doesn't make sense to include it in the review. There's also an Apple Watch app, which was a pleasant surprise. It doesn't provide a shot preview, but is still handy to control the camera remotely. The UI is responsive, easy to use, and exposes key information like remaining battery life and storage capacity. I really like this, and to be honest, I'm confused why this isn't advertised more prominently. Overlay. You can add an overlay to your footage using the GPS remote, which is sold separately, but I was excited to find that I could also use my Apple Watch. All you need to do is log a workout that overlaps with your footage, and then use the iOS app to apply it to a clip. You get to pick what it looks like from a selection of templates, and also get to choose which data to show on screen. But it's not clear how I would capture data from activities which are not on the list of supported workouts, such as sailing. You can also use your mobile phone to capture GPS data for the overlay. I tried doing this with dashcam footage, thinking it would be good to overlay my speed. Technically it works well, but you need to keep the phone awake with the app open, so I can't imagine there being many situations where it's practical. Though I'm grateful for the ability to use overlays without buying dedicated hardware, if this feature interests you, it may well be worth paying for the GPS remote. Markers. Markers are useful if you're leaving the camera recording for an extended period. If you drop one while recording, a marker will be placed in time, which you can then quickly find later while editing, though only in the Studio app. You can lay a marker by tapping this icon on the screen, or by using the side button, which is useful in situations where it's hard to give the camera your full attention or when the dive casing is on. Annoyingly, loop mode disregards markers. They get saved as expected, but the camera does nothing to stop the footage being overridden. This seems like a glaring oversight that rules the camera out for use as a dashcam. AI markers, though much touted, don't interest me much. This is because they necessitate the use of the Studio app, which I try to avoid if possible, but you can't be sure whether the result is worth the hassle in advance, since the AI can only guess what's important to you. File management. Regarding file management, I've found it to be an area of disappointment. After tinkering with the camera for several days, I found the contents of the memory card to be overwhelming and nonsensical, at least to a layperson. Files are split between folders, seemingly randomly, making them harder to locate. Star trails litter the memory card with photos of individual frames and sometimes these additional YUV files, which are quite large. There are thumbnail, gyro, and low-res video files strewn around. I know they all have a purpose, but exploring a memory card is increasingly hostile to anyone not using the official app. All cameras have their quirks, and this issue is not specific to the Ace Pro, but it definitely feels like the Studio app is a required part of the workflow, which makes me worry for a future where Insta360 decides to stop updating it. Or if it were to be buggy. Look here how a memory card with several folders and thousands of files fails to load correctly, producing only a single item in the Studio app. Clearly the data is there, but the app is now as confused as I am by the multi-folder structure, and I'm reduced to navigating them manually and pointing the app to the right subfolder with a specific file I want. I won't say this is a deal breaker because it's quite rare that I fill my card to this extent, but it's getting uncomfortable. Thankfully, the camera doesn't appear to have any 2 or 4 GB file size limits, nor any apparent limit on video length. The Mac ecosystem. Connecting to a Mac is as easy as plugging in a powered-on camera and selecting the mode you want. Options include disk mode and webcam mode. Although the webcam mode appears to work well, I doubt I would ever use this camera as a webcam, so it's a shame there's no way to have it default to disk mode. Once connected, both macOS Sonoma and Lightroom have native compatibility with the produced DNG files. A Mac will not reveal your video files in either photos or image capture. Fortunately, Finder exposes it, as it would any removable media, and both Final Cut Pro and Studio access it without issue. But if you're looking for a smooth experience on a Mac, it's only half there. I'll concede this is partly a problem for Apple to fix, but if you're buying this camera for casual use, you may want to keep this in mind. Now that we've put the camera through its paces, here's a quick summary of my findings. The key pros include great build quality, menu system, and footage. It meets all the modern expectations in H.265, USB-C, fast charging, excellent stabilization, overlays, and pretty good iOS and Apple Watch apps. No overheating in my testing, although admittedly it was winter. The flippy screen is bright and good resolution, and decent battery life. The worst cons were the polarized screen, and this is the main one. Honestly, I can't believe this hasn't made more noise. Every time I use the camera with my sunglasses, I get annoyed. If the return window hadn't already closed, I would probably have sent it back by now for this reason alone. Minimum focus distance. Some channels point out that you can fashion a DIY diopter. No idea how that works, but maybe it's something Insta360 could sell for vloggers. The lens is not user-changeable. Everyone else manages this, so it must be achievable. Some channels even think it is, but most people wouldn't accept an unofficial solution. The Studio app is required to get a lot of the advertised functionality. This leads to an awkward workflow, where I can no longer just import my footage directly into Final Cut Pro, and I have to take extra care not to lose any of the additional files that are on the memory card in case they are needed. Also, the Mac app is buggy and unintuitive, and the iOS app, though otherwise good, is ruined by pop-up ads. Lots of little details, such as audio should start recording immediately, the default sharpness mode should be low, Star Trail photos should have a 4-digit sequence number and bundled up into a single folder. There should be a way to select disk mode as default so that you don't have to select it every time you connect the camera to your computer. There should be a way, in camera, to generate a Star Trail video from a stack of shots. It shouldn't delete clips with markers on them in the loop record mode. The Apple Watch could do with showing an image preview. And the SD card name should persist after a reformat. Hopefully, most of this list is trivial to fix via firmware update. Closing thoughts. It's clear the Ace Pro is a serious attempt by Insta360 to take a chunk out of the action camera market. They've done a lot of things right and pushed the whole category forward with real technological advances, especially in low-light video. In fact, if the screen wasn't polarized and the minimum focus distance was a little nearer, this camera would outright win the category in my mind, and at least one of those problems is trivial to solve. I do wonder if, with its excellent mobile app and a screen that works best in portrait orientation, the target market might have been TikTok creators. But for the rest of us who edit more traditional content on computers and avoid vertical video, the camera isn't perfect. Though it deserves your serious consideration, the real excitement will come when we see how the market responds and what learnings make their way into the Ace Pro 2. Bring it on.